Hey everyone, this is the 5-minute lab walkthrough for lab number 10, forming ionic compounds. So in this lab, you will build models of ionic compounds and draw dot diagrams of these compounds as well. So you have this lovely section of background info that goes over how ionic bonds are formed, what happens, and all that other great stuff. So definitely worth reading into. Part 1 involves you drawing the actual dot diagrams for the atoms. So we'll be working with chlorine, fluorine, sodium, and magnesium. So draw the dot diagrams of those atoms. Now at this point, at your lab station, you will see two folders, a larger orange one and a small green one. At this point, open up the orange one and take out two chlorine atoms, one fluorine, one sodium, and one magnesium. These are the ones you're going to be working with in today's lab. Everything else just leave in the folder. So now you have these two questions based on just what happens when you look at the two models. Then part 2 is talking about what happens when they form ions. So for each of these specific elements, you have three questions. Questions are, will you gain or lose electrons? How many will it lose? And then what the charge will be. And once you've figured all of that out, that will be easier then for you to draw the dot diagrams of those four ions. So next part is using those models to actually build the different compounds. So first compound we're going to build is sodium fluoride. So these two questions are basically how many electrons does one want to lose, how many does one want to gain. And at this point, you're going to take a valent electron from the sodium atom and transfer it to fluorine. Now do not connect the pieces, you're only going to move the electron. So there'll be another clip to show you how to do that. Here we have two of the atoms you will see in your folder. So we have sodium and we have chlorine. Sodium, you have your electrons, so the shaded dots represent electrons, and in that valence shell, the little fasteners represent electrons. Same thing with chlorine, all the inner shells are full, you have its 7 valence electrons. So what these are used for is to show the actual transfer of electrons. So on the backs of each, you'll see the number of valence electrons, so we have 1, we have 7, so how many it should have. But you're able to pop this off like that, forming a sodium ion. So after it loses its electron, and then we're able to place it in chlorine, just like so. Pinch it down, and now you have a complete octet in chlorine. And that is how you will create your ions. You won't do other ones in the lab, but it works very much the same. You're literally moving electrons from one thing to the other. When you're done, just make sure that you move these electrons back to where you got them from and that you are looking at the number of electrons it should have. Now, we're telling you how many sodiums you're using, how many fluorines you are using, and you should be able to write the formula. Now, when you're writing the formula of your compound, it's generally your metal first, then your nonmetal. Then you have the number of the metals that you used, the number of the nonmetals that you used. So, for example, if you were to use, this is made up, but if you were to use 1 lithium and 2 oxygen, that would be Li. 2 lithiums and 1 oxygen would be Li2O. So metals come first, then nonmetals, and those little numbers tell you how many of each you have. Then based on that, you have 2 other questions based on the models that you create of these ions, what those shells look like, and why you couldn't connect them. And then at this point, we want you to open up the small little green envelopes. And in those envelopes, you'll see pieces of dot diagrams for ions, and we're going to use those to help you make dot diagrams of the compounds. So these are the different pieces in the green envelope that you will see, different dot diagrams for the different ions. So your job is to create a dot diagram using these pieces. So for example, if we were going to use sodium chloride, you have your sodium ion, you have your chlorine ion, and boom, you are done. We have our positive, we have our negative, and that is your dot diagram for that. So once it's arranged, you can now draw it. The ones on your lab are a bit different, but you can handle that. Once all that is done, you'll do the same thing for compound 2. Again, this compound is slightly more difficult, but you are definitely able to handle that. You'll build it, answer questions on it. And that's the lab for the week. Now, this is super important that at the end of the lab that you are returning all the little pieces to its location. So all the dot diagrams go back in the green envelopes, all the atoms go back in the orange envelopes. But the most important thing is that the valence electrons, those little fasteners, get placed back to their atoms. But that is it for lab number 10. Bye.